Right now, a federal judge here in New York City is preparing to hear arguments over the so-called Plan B emergency contraceptive, also called the morning after pill. The White House overruling a recent FDA decision to make a non-generic version of the pill available over the counter to women and girls of all ages. Age, the sticking point here. A decision some women's rights groups are calling purely political. Shannon Bream is live in Washington with more on that for us. Shannon.
Hi, John. Well, a number of pro-choice groups say they are furious about the administration's decision to block over-the-counter access to the Plan B morning after pill for those under the age of 17. Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius overruled the FDA's recommendation and mandated that any young woman seeking access to the emergency contraception who isn't 17 yet must get a prescription in order to get the pills, which some pro-life groups argue can actually induce an abortion. Pro-choice advocates say they are outraged and feel betrayed. Here's Nancy Northup of the Center for Reproductive Rights.
The actions last week by the Secretary of HHS were a betrayal of the president's promise to have science and not politics make decisions about women's reproductive health. It's really critical that contraceptives be able to have the same standard of science when it comes to approving them for over-the-counter use. What we saw last week was that politics was the standard, not science.
Although President Obama says he was not involved in the decision made by Secretary Sebelius, he does support it. Critics of the move, however, are questioning whether the president has made a political calculation. They're arguing that he knows pro-choice advocates are unlikely to abandon him and go vote for a GOP rival, but that the issue of 12-year-old girls having unfettered access to the morning after pill could launch a culture war that he may not want to engage in as he campaigns for re-election. The FDA is also due to respond today to a request to make a generic version of the morning after pill more widely available. A legal fight over that was launched back in the Bush administration, and it is still ongoing today. John?
But didn't the secretary say that essentially there hadn't been enough studies done on the age brackets and the appropriateness of just handing out that pill to, say, 12-year-olds?
She did, and she expressed great concern about something like this being accessible to a 10, 11, 12-year-old girl. And the president even said in his comments after the fact that you have to use common sense along with the science in making a decision. John?
Shannon Bream, who covers legal events for us. Shannon, thank you.
Common sense and science. You have the federal government as well as state rights, and that's something that the Brooklyn court is looking at today. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. Former federal prosecutor Doug Burns is with us, as well as criminal defense attorney Tad Nelson. And so this is what the federal judge in Brooklyn is looking at today. He's hearing arguments about whether the government, the federal government, is acting constitutionally in its decision over the access teenage girls have to this pill. And there's a lot of strong feelings, Tad and Doug, about this, about the pill itself. But we're really looking at the law, the constitutionality of this all. Doug, starting with you first, what is the argument on the side of the prosecution in this case?
Well, the argument, the Center for Reproductive Rights has brought a lawsuit against the administration, and they basically make a two-pronged argument. Number one, I suppose, is that the Secretary of HHS acted unreasonably when she disagreed and overruled the findings of the FDA, and that's sort of an administrative law question. And then the other argument they're making is that this particular medication is being singled out and being treated differently than similar ones. And I just want to say, sort of from an editorial standpoint, that legal analysis very often does not line up with political analysis. Judge Corman is a brilliant jurist who I've appeared before many, many times, and he'll sort it out legally.
Pick up off of that, Tad. Which is the stronger argument? Doug just mentioned there's two. You have one that's really based in law, but you have one that's based in, well, common sense.
Right.
Well, clearly, and it's a little bit more than just common sense. It's based totally in politics, which, if you stretch that a little further, it's based totally in religion. This comes down to one question. This is an abortion issue. This is no different than any other abortion issue to these people. And they're not going to look at the science. The science isn't important. If you look at the statistics and the science together, the reason we don't let kids drink alcohol is because they're not responsible enough for it. Same reason we don't let them drive till they're a certain age, same reason you can't consume tobacco. However, in this situation, if you look at the statistics, teenage pregnancy is horrible. It ruins lives. It brings you poverty. It brings you illiteracy. I mean, the statistics are overwhelming. However, in this situation, despite if you would allow this drug to be used by these people and all the goods that it could do, they're still making a stance against it. And that shows you, despite the information, they don't care. It comes down to one question. It's another abortion question. Conservatives are never going to have another stance on it.
Do you agree with that? Because some are arguing that it's actually just a double standard when it comes down to the medication itself. That, you know, when you look at other medication that's, you know, available over the counter, it can be more complicated than this pill could be. And if it's really about making a choice and being able to take the pill correctly, then there is a double standard. So what do you think about that?
Well, let me just say, I mean, first, you know, from a political standpoint, it's interesting. Mayor Bloomberg, the mayor of New York City, takes the opposite position from the President of the United States, arguing basically that this is a counterintuitive issue. While, of course, we don't want to promote sex, you know, with 12 and 13-year-olds, the reality is that this will be more of a solution. But the fact of the matter is that if this were a situation, and I think this is what you were getting at, Jenna, where some obscure, and Tad is making the same point, an obscure scientific aspect having nothing to do with the hot-button issue of abortion or contraception were involved, this would never even be a story. That's the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tad, your final thoughts on this?
And I agree with him. He just hit the nail on the head. If this wasn't an abortion issue, you wouldn't have invited us to your show today. And that's what's so unfortunate here is I'm glad to be here, but at the same time, we are just kicking a dead horse. And we should go with the science, allow all the good that this drug can do, and move on and get politics and religion out of this.
You raise a good point, Tad. That is one of the reasons, because there's so many different emotions just surrounding this one issue, and then you have all these different sides to it as well. And it comes down to what's right and what's wrong, what's legal and what's not. And sometimes those things don't always coincide, as we know.
Exactly.
Tad and Doug, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna.
A winter storm